A father builds treehouse for his kids. They discover a rusted box buried beneath it. Inside were photos of a child who looked exactly like his daughter. I didn't build the treehouse for nostalgia. I built it because I wanted to see my kids outside, away from screens, and doing something that felt like the kind of childhood I remembered. Back when falling out of trees just meant a scraped knee and not a lawsuit. My name's Raymond Carter. I work concrete, have for 16 years, and when I get home, I like peace. Not the kind that comes from silence, but the kind where my kids laugh without needing YouTube to do it. We had this old oak in the backyard. Thick trunk, limbs like arms flexed in midair, practically begging to hold something. So one summer weekend, I got to work. My boy Kyle, 11 and obsessed with tactical gear, became my assistant. My daughter Lily, 8, going on 18, mostly handed me screws and took pictures with her pink iPad. It took 3 weekends, 6 trips to Home Depot and a sprained wrist, but we finally had it, a sturdy platform with railing, a pitched roof, and even a working pulley system to hoist up snacks. The kids were ecstatic. It wasn't perfect, but it had soul. The 4th weekend was supposed to be about relaxing, but you know how kids are. They never let things sit. "Dad, the floor is uneven," Lily said, her voice carrying down from the treehouse like a command. "It's wobbly near the far corner," I groaned. "Tell your brother to check it." "Maybe the plywood's loose," Kyle shouted. "I think something's under here." That got my attention. I climbed up, leaned into the far corner, and noticed the plank wasn't flush. With a crowbar, I popped it loose. There was a hollow sound, like I'd hit something metal beneath the wood. My chest tightened a little. We hadn't dug this area much. Why would there be metal? "Get back," I told the kids. I climbed down, went to the shed, and came back with a shovel. I dug into the earth, dry and clumped from summer heat. After just a few scoops, the shovel struck something solid. Metal, all right. I knelt and brushed away the dirt. It was a box maybe the size of a microwave, rusted over and streaked with black. The lock had corroded into nothing, and the hinges squealed when I pulled it open. Inside were photos, old ones, black and white, faded around the edges. Most were creased or torn, and in every single one was a child, a girl, same age as Lily, same face, same everything. I felt my blood run cold. My hands trembled. "Lily," I said, standing quickly, "take your brother inside." She tilted her head, confused. "What's wrong with now?" They both went, dragging their sneakers across the yard, mumbling about adults being weird. I stayed. I laid the photos out on the grass. There were maybe 20 of them. The same little girl appeared in different settings on a porch, beside a barn, holding a stick of candy, but the dates scribbled in pen on the back told me they were all from the night. Some went as far back as 48. I checked the bottom of the box. There was a single piece of paper, a birth certificate, no last name, just Anna, born May 19, 1948. Mother, unknown. Father, Thomas Carter. My stomach flipped. Carter, my last name. I went inside, box tucked under my arm, and locked it in my gun safe. Not because I was scared someone would steal it, but because I didn't know what the hell I was dealing with yet, and I needed time to think. That night, I didn't sleep much. I dug through our family albums, traced our lineage as far as I could. My grandfather was Thomas Carter, born and served in Korea, moved to Ohio in no mention of a daughter named Anna, only one son, my dad Robert. I called my father the next morning. "Dad," I said, "you ever hear of someone named Anna, born in 1948, same last name as ours?" There was silence on the line. Then he spoke. "Who told you that name?" I hesitated. "I found a box in the yard, under the treehouse. Photos. She looks exactly like Lily. I'm not joking." Dad didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, "You're not supposed to know about her." "What do you mean supposed to?" He exhaled sharply. "Look, Ray, when I was 5, we lived on that property. Your grandpa kept a shed in the back, always locked. I snuck in once, found some photos. That girl was in them. I asked him who she was. He said she was a ghost. She's not a ghost. She's real. She looks like Lily. I know, you know, I think she was his first daughter, before me, but he never talked about it again, ever. That didn't sit right with me. None of it did. 2 days later, I went to the county records office. I gave them the name and birth year. The clerk came back with a file, dusty and thin. It contained a single page, a missing persons report filed in 1956. Anna Carter, last seen near Chestnut Ridge Farm, age 8. The form had been signed by Thomas Carter. No follow-up, no resolution, just I drove home, hands gripping the steering wheel tight. Something in my family's past had been buried, literally, and it was starting to claw its way back up. When I got home, the kids were already back in the treehouse. Kyle had tied a rope ladder to the far branch. Lily was sitting on the edge, legs swinging. I watched her for a long time. Same round cheeks, same dimples, same eyes. It was like I was staring at a ghost in real time. But she wasn't a ghost. She was my daughter. And the girl in those photos, whoever she really was, had been taken, hidden, maybe even silenced. I didn't know what I'd stirred up, but I knew I wasn't about to let it stay buried. Not anymore. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you are watching from today and what time you are currently watching this video. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more. The next morning I woke up early, the box heavy in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, even though the house was quiet. I checked the gun safe once more, then grabbed my keys and headed out before anyone else was awake. I was going to see my uncle, Frank Carter. He was my grandfather's brother, and the only living person I knew who might remember anything about Anna. I didn't tell the kids or my wife where I was going. I needed to be alone with this. Frank's house was a rundown ranch, a few towns over. I hadn't seen him in years. When I knocked, he opened the door, his eyes narrowing when he saw me. "Raymond," he said gruffly, "didn't expect to see you. I need to ask you something about the family, about my grandpa." He stepped aside and let me in. Inside, the place smelled of stale smoke and old paper. Photos cluttered the walls, but none of kids or women, mostly hunting trophies and black and white snapshots of men in uniform. I sat down and pulled out the box, then carefully placed the photos on the table. "I found these," I said. Frank's eyes flicked to the pictures, then away. "Where did you get these?" he asked, voice low. "Under the treehouse, in my backyard." Frank rubbed his chin, then leaned back in his chair. "Your grandpa was a complicated man. He had a lot of secrets. Anna, she was his daughter, from before he met your grandma. But she disappeared. Nobody talked about it, but we all knew something was wrong." "Disappeared how? What do you mean?" Frank looked me in the eye. "Kid vanished just like that. Your grandpa said she ran away, but the truth, I don't know if anyone wanted to find her." My stomach clenched. "Why would they hide her? She looked just like my daughter." Frank hesitated. "Because things weren't right with the family back then. Your grandpa had debts, big ones, people who weren't the kind to ask questions." I nodded slowly. This was turning darker than I expected. "I want to see where she was last seen," I said suddenly. "Where the report said Chestnut Ridge Farm." Frank shrugged on his jacket. "I'll come with you." We drove for an hour, the sun rising behind us. The farm was nothing but a stretch of rolling fields and thick wood, a place that had been deserted for years. The farmhouse was boarded up, windows smashed, signs warned trespassers. We walked past the gate, crunching over dead leaves and old stones. The air smelled damp, like earth that had been soaking up secrets for decades. Frank pointed to a cluster of trees. "That's where they said she was last seen. Some folks claimed they saw her near the barn." I followed his gaze and noticed something odd. Near the ground, a patch of disturbed dirt, like someone had been digging recently. I dropped to my knees and dug with my bare hands. A chunk of metal hit my fingers. Frank helped me clear the dirt, revealing another rusted box, smaller than the one I found, but locked tight. We wrestled with it, and finally, with a loud snap, the lock gave way. Inside there were letters, yellowed with age and brittle at the edges. Frank carefully unfolded one. It was written in shaky handwriting. "They don't want me here anymore. Grandpa says I'm a mistake. I'm scared. If anything happens to me, please find Mom. I love you." The signature was just a scribble, but I knew it was Anna. We searched the barn and found more letters, scraps of fabric, and a small diary hidden in the loft. The entries told a story of fear and loneliness. Anna was trapped, kept away from family and friends. She wrote about a man she called Mr. Dalton, who came to the farm at night, watching her. Frank and I exchanged a look. This wasn't just a missing child story. It was something else, something dangerous. Before I could say anything, the sharp crack of a gunshot rang out from the far field. We froze. "Get down," Frank hissed, pulling me behind the barn's rotting wall. Shots came again, closer this time. I could hear branches snapping and footsteps pounding. I grabbed a broken piece of wood, bracing for whatever was coming. Two men emerged from the tree line, rifles raised, faces hidden under hats and scarves. Frank and I stayed still, hearts pounding. "Who's there?" one shouted. No answer. The men scanned the area, muttering to each other. I glanced at Frank, who was ready to run. Suddenly, a third man appeared behind them, a tall figure with a badge clipped to his belt. "Drop your weapons," the officer barked. The two men hesitated, then lowered their guns. "What the hell is going on here?" the officer demanded, eyeing us suspiciously. Frank stepped forward. "We're just investigating the disappearance of a girl. Anna Carter. You know anything?" The officer's face hardened. "Anna Carter? That's old news. Nothing to do with you folks." "Maybe not," I said, "but I'm not leaving until I find out what happened to her." The officer scowled, but said nothing more. The armed men turned and disappeared back into the woods. Frank and I looked at each other, shaken. Back in the car, I felt a cold rage bubbling inside me. Why had these men been shooting near an abandoned farm? Who were they protecting? And why did the police officer seem more interested in shutting us down than helping? I glanced at the photos again, now folded neatly in my pocket. Anna's face stared back at me. It was clear that someone had been watching for a long time, someone who didn't want Anna's story to come out. That night, I told my wife everything. She was frightened but supported me. "I don't care what it takes," I said. "I'm going to find out what happened." The kids were excited about the treehouse, but didn't understand why I was so tense. I promised them we'd make it safe, but beneath the surface, I knew we'd stumbled onto something much bigger, something that could put us all in danger. The morning after the confrontation at the farm, I couldn't sleep. The images of the gunman and that strange cop kept replaying in my mind like a bad movie. Who were those men? Why would they shoot near a deserted place no one cared about? And why did the officer act like he wanted to bury the whole thing? I grabbed my coffee, flicked on the news, hoping for some kind of clue. Nothing. I decided it was time to get serious and start digging into the local records, the kind you don't find online. I needed to see if there was any paper trail about Anna's disappearance, her father's debts, and the strange men who had tried to scare me off. My wife, Sarah, offered to watch the kids while I headed to the county archives downtown. The building was old, with thick oak doors and the smell of dust and time. I spent hours scrolling through microfilm, old newspapers, and police reports. The disappearance of Anna Carter was barely mentioned. Just a short note in the local paper that said a young girl was missing from Chestnut Ridge Farm back in '67. No follow-up, no arrests, no explanation, just silence. But buried deeper in the files, I found something odd. A series of property transfers and legal documents tied to my grandfather's name, with several mentions of settlement agreements and confidential clauses. There were also warnings about third-party claims on the farm. It was clear my grandfather had been trying to protect something, or someone. Back at home, Sarah watched the kids play in the treehouse, their laughter a bittersweet soundtrack to my growing unease. The box with Anna's photos sat on the kitchen table, a constant reminder of what was at stake. Later that evening, I decided to call Frank again. We needed a plan. We're onto something bigger than just a lost girl, I told him over the phone. Someone's been protecting a secret all this time. Frank's voice was grim. Be careful, Ray. You know how folks in this town can be. Secrets like these, they don't stay buried. I agreed and told him I'd keep digging. We arranged to meet again, this time with some help. The next day, I brought along a friend from work, Mike, a former Marine and no-nonsense kind of guy who knew how to handle himself in a fight. I wanted someone I could trust if things went south. We met Frank at the edge of the woods by Chestnut Ridge Farm. Mike carried a rifle. I had my pistol tucked in my jacket. The plan was simple. We'd search the area thoroughly, looking for any clues the authorities had missed or covered up. We split up and headed toward the barn. The ground was still soft from recent rain, making footprints easy to track. Near the old barn, Mike called out, "Hey, over here, we found fresh footprints leading into the woods. They were too recent to be from hunters or kids. Someone had been there just a few days ago." We followed the trail carefully, slipping through thick underbrush. The air was heavy with the scent of wet earth and decay. Suddenly, Mike stopped and crouched low. "Listen," he whispered. We heard voices low and urgent from a small clearing ahead. Peeking through the trees, I saw two men arguing. One was the cop from the farm, the one with the badge. The other was older, dressed in a worn leather jacket. "Tell me you've got the package," the cop said sharply. The other man shook his head. "Not yet. It's not safe to move it tonight." I tightened my grip on the pistol. Mike motioned to wait, but I knew we couldn't let them get away. I whispered, "We need to know what they're talking about." Before we could decide, the cop suddenly glanced our way. "Who's there?" he barked, drawing his gun. "Drop it," Mike shouted, stepping out with his rifle aimed. The cop cursed and dove for cover behind a fallen log. Gunfire erupted. I fired once, hitting a tree near the man in the leather jacket. Mike kept his calm, firing bursts to keep the cop pinned down. The other man scrambled into the woods, disappearing among the trees. "After him," I shouted. We ran through the underbrush, branches slapping my face, heart pounding. Mike kept yelling commands, trying to keep us coordinated. Suddenly, the man turned, pulling a handgun and firing at us. I dropped behind a tree, feeling the thud of a bullet grazing my jacket. Mike fired back, hitting the man's arm. He cried out, stumbled, then vanished into the thick forest. Panting, we regrouped near the clearing. "We need backup," Mike said, eyes scanning the woods. "No cops," I said firmly. "Not after what happened before." Frank's voice crackled over the radio. "I'm at the barn, found something." We hurried back. Frank was kneeling beside another patch of loose dirt. "Looks like a fresh grave," he said grimly. We dug quickly and uncovered a wooden crate, sealed shut and rotting with age. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were more photographs, this time black and white pictures of a girl, and only these were older, from decades ago. There was also a small diary. I opened it and read aloud. "They say I'm a mistake, but I'm not. I'm their blood, their flesh. They want to bury me and forget, but I won't let them." The words hit me like a punch. Suddenly, a crackling on the radio interrupted the silence. "Police, drop your weapons," Mike cursed. "Did they track us?" I asked. "Looks like it," Frank said. We had a choice, run or surrender. Mike looked at me. "Run." We sprinted toward the tree line, bullets flying behind us. Branches tore at our clothes, but adrenaline kept us moving. We reached the creek at the edge of the woods and jumped in, water soaking us instantly. The police didn't follow. We made it back to the car, breathless and soaked. Driving home, I stared at the photos and diary. Anna's story was tangled with secrets and lies. Someone had gone to great lengths to erase her from history, but I wasn't going to let that happen again. At home, Sarah and the kids greeted me with relief. I promised to keep them safe, but deep down, I knew the danger was far from over. After the narrow escape from the police near Chestnut Ridge Farm, I knew things were spiraling into territory far more dangerous than I'd imagined. The photos and diary were proof that Anna Carter's disappearance wasn't just a tragic accident or an unsolved mystery. It was part of a much bigger cover-up, one someone was still fighting to keep buried. Back home, I sat down with Sarah and told her everything. I explained the box, the photos, the strange men, the shooting, and the cover-up we'd stumbled into. Her eyes widened as she listened, but she didn't panic. Instead, she insisted on helping. "We're in this together," she said firmly. That night, while the kids slept in the treehouse, our little sanctuary, I pored over the diary again. The entries revealed a girl named Anna, who had been hidden away by her own family, buried beneath lies and silence. She mentioned a name repeatedly, Charles Morgan, a local businessman with influence that reached into the police force. A man who didn't want anyone digging too deep. It was clear now that the gunman and even that crooked cop had ties to Morgan. They weren't just protecting property or old secrets. They were guarding a crime that had stayed hidden for decades. The next morning, I contacted Frank and Mike. We decided the only way to break this was to confront Morgan directly. We arrived at his sprawling estate, a grand house that screamed wealth and power. His security guards eyed us suspiciously, but Frank, who knew how to talk his way through trouble, convinced them we had an appointment. Morgan met us in his study, a room filled with expensive art and heavy oak furniture. He smiled like a man who'd already won. "You don't understand what you're messing with," he said smoothly. "Some things are better left in the past." I slammed the box with the photos and diary onto the desk. "Your past has a body buried under that farm, and I'm here to make sure it sees the light." Morgan's smile vanished. His guards moved forward. Before they could reach us, Mike pulled his rifle from under his jacket. "Back off!" Shots rang out. Morgan's men fired blindly, but we'd come prepared. Frank and I ducked behind chairs while Mike returned fire. In the chaos, Morgan slipped away through a hidden door. We chased him down the hall to the back exit, but security blocked the way. Mike raised his rifle and fired a warning shot into the air. "Last chance," he growled. The guards backed down. Morgan ran into the nearby woods. We didn't follow. Instead, we called the local press and the few honest cops we knew. The evidence, the photos, diary, and the crate went public. The story exploded. Newspapers ran front-page headlines about the decades-old cover-up, the missing girl, and the powerful man who tried to hide the truth. Morgan was arrested within days. At home, Sarah and I sat in the treehouse one afternoon watching the kids play nearby. The box with the photos was safely locked away, but now it felt like a symbol, not just of mystery and fear, but of truth finally being set free. My daughter Emily looked up at me and smiled. She had no idea she had a look-alike buried in the past, or the danger we'd faced because of it. All I knew was that sometimes, the things we find buried, whether in the earth or in history, can change everything. And sometimes, it takes a fight to bring the truth to light. If you liked this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Also, another to strengthen our community, let us know in the comments where you are watching from and what time you are currently watching this video.